Welcome to today's lesson on deciding where to place the first digit in division. Sometimes it can be really difficult to decide where to place that first digit when you're trying to write your quotient. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we begin today, I want to review the vocabulary when we're doing division problems. Your dividend is the number that you are dividing. Your divisor is the number that you are dividing it by, and your quotient is the answer to your division problem. So let's go ahead and let's go through the steps for deciding where to place the first digit in division. We're always going to start on the furthest number to the left on your dividend. So we want to find out how many times our divisor can fit into the first digit of our dividend. So let's go ahead and write 3 times 1. Can we fit 3 into 3 one time? And since 3 times 1 equals 3, that means we can fit 3 into 3 one time. So we are going to write our number 1 right above the 3 in our first place value. 3 times 1 equals 3. And then we need to subtract down. 3 minus 3 equals 0. So that's our first step into our first place value. Now we need to move over to our second place value and repeat the steps that we just placed, except this time we're going to find out how many times 3 can fit into 7. Now we know that 3 can fit into 7 at least one time. If we multiply 3 times 2, that equals 6, which means 3 can fit into 7 at least 2 times. But what happens if we put 3 times 3? Well, 3 times 3 equals 9. And since 9 is greater than 7, that means that we cannot fit 3 into 7 3 times. We can only fit it in 2 times. So I'm going to write a 2 right above this place value. And I'm actually going to drop down my 7. 3 times 2 equals 6. And again, I'm going to repeat the steps and subtract. 7 minus 6 equals 1. Now I'm ready to repeat my steps again, this time bringing down my final place value. I'm going to bring down my 2 and find out how many times 3 can go into 12. Well, I know that 3 can go into 12 4 times. 3 times 4 equals 12. And now I subtract out again. 12 minus 12 equals 0. And that means that I don't have a remainder because I don't have any more place values to bring down. Now it's important to remember that I had to line up my quotient with whatever place value I was trying to fit my divisor into. And that's going to make sure that I have the correct place values when I'm finding my quotient. Now that we've looked at one example where we placed our first digit of our quotient above our first place value in our dividend, let's look at a different problem. We need to divide 1,657 by a divisor of 8. So let's repeat the same steps that we used in our previous problem. How many times can 8 go into our first digit of our dividend? Well, any time your divisor is larger than your first digit in your dividend, you immediately need to go to your next place value over and try dividing into 16 instead of 1. And we're also going to put a 0 above that first digit in our dividend. And that's going to be a placeholder to let us know that our quotient is now going to start in the hundreds place, not in the thousands place. So how many times can 8 go into 16? 8 can go into 16 2 times. 8 times 2 equals 16. And when we subtract 16 minus 16, we get 0. So now we're ready to go to our next step and move into our next place value. How many times can 8 go into 5? Well, 8 can't go into 5 because 8's larger than 5, which means we need to bring down our next place value. Now we can see how many times 8 can go into 57. But before we do that, we need to remember to put a 0 as a placeholder. Since we had to skip to our next place value over, we need to make sure that we put a 0 as a placeholder for our tens place. 8 can go into 57 7 times. 8 times 7 equals 56. And when we subtract down, that gives us a remainder of 1. Now, since I don't have any other place values to bring down, that means that my final problem will have a remainder of 1. And again, it's very important to remember that if you need to move to the next place value over, you have to put a 0 as a placeholder. Let's walk through a practice problem together. We are going to divide 4,741 by a divisor of 7. So our first step is to find out how many times 7 can go into our first digit of our dividend. Since 7 is greater than 4, we immediately put a 0 above our thousands place as a placeholder, and then we move over to our next place value. How many times can 7 fit into 47? Well, let's see. 7 times 5 equals 35. So we know that 7 can fit into 47 at least 5 times. 7 times 6 equals 42. So we're getting closer. 7 times 7 equals 49. Since 49 is greater than 47, that means we can only fit 7 into 47 6 whole times. So I'm going to put a 6 above my hundreds place. 7 times 6 equals 42. And then I'm going to subtract down, and that gives me 5. Now I'm ready to repeat these steps, bringing down my 4. How many times can 7 go into 54? Well, we know that 7 can go into 54 at least 7 times. If we multiply 7 times 8, that gives us 56, which is more than 54. So 7 can go into 54 only 7 whole times. 7 times 7 equals 49, and that gives us a remainder of 5. So now we're ready to bring down our last place value. How many times can 7 fit into 51? 7 can fit into 51 7 whole times. 7 times 7 equals 49, and when I subtract down, that gives me a remainder of 2. Now remember, it's very important to keep all of your place values lined up. Let's walk through a word problem together. A school had 1,212 tickets to sell at the school carnival. To help sell them more quickly, the school divided the tickets evenly among 4 classes. How many tickets did each class have to sell? Well, we know that we're starting with 1,212 tickets, and we need to divide that by 4 classes. So we're going to set up 1,212 divided by 4. Now our first step is to find out how many times 4 can go into the first digit of our dividend. But since 4 is greater than 1, we need to put a 0 as a placeholder and move over to our next place value. 4 can go into 12 3 times. 4 times 3 equals 12, and when I subtract out, that gives me 0. Now I'm ready to move to my next place value. How many times can 4 go into 1? Well, 4 is greater than 1, so again I need to put a 0 as a placeholder above my tens place and move over to my next place value. 4 can go into 12 3 times. 4 times 3 equals 12, and 12 minus 12 equals 0. Since I don't have any more place values to bring down, that means I have a remainder of 0. So each class needs to sell 303 tickets. Let's review what we've learned in today's lesson. When you're dividing, your first step is to find out how many times your divisor can fit into your first digit of your dividend. If your divisor is larger than the first digit in your dividend, you need to put a 0 as a placeholder and move into the next place value over. 3 can go into 23 7 times. 3 times 7 equals 21. 23 minus 21 equals 2. And now I'm ready to bring down my next place value. 3 can go into 28 9 times. 3 times 9 equals 27. And when I subtract 27 from 28, I get a remainder of 1. Since I don't have any more place values to bring down, that means that I have a remainder of 1.